Isa sa mga katanungan na tinatanong ng mga nag-i-intermittent fasting ay kung hindi ba masama sa kalusugan nila kung hindi kakain sila ng 3 beses sa isang araw. Dahil ang sabi nila ay nakasanayan na nilang kumain ng 3 beses sa isang araw mula nung bata pa sila, at maraming doktor ang sinasabi rin ay dapat kailangang kumain ng 3 beses sa isang araw. Iyan yung katanungan na subukan nating sagutin sa video na ito. Whenever we eat, especially carbohydrates and particularly sugar, when this food enter our body, they're converted into glucose. At sa pagkaalam na ng karamihan ng tao, ang glucose ay the so-called energy of life. Bakit? Dahil each and every cell of our body requires glucose for them to function properly. Now, when glucose enters our bloodstream, it is distributed in 3 ways. Una, most of it, the bulk of the glucose produced from the carbohydrates that we eat, they go to the different cells of our body. Because sa sinabi na natin kanina, is each and every cell of our body requires glucose for them to function properly. Pangalawa, if we eat a full meal, the glucose that is produced by a full meal ay sobra pa yan sa pangangailangan ng each and every cell of our body. So kaya, yung excess glucose, yung sobrang glucose, ay napupunta sa atay natin. Particularly sa glycogen. And it's stored there for future use. Ang glycogen, kung sa sasakyan pa, ito ay yung reserve fuel tank na ginagamit lang kung hindi na tayo kakain. Now, yung glycogen is good enough for 12 hours of our energy requirements. Ibig sabihin, hindi man tayo kakain for 12 hours after a full meal, ay walang problema. Because yung glucose na kinakailangan ng ating katawan ay doon kukunin ng katawan natin sa glycogen. So we have a reserve fuel tank called glycogen, and yung glycogen is good for 12 hours of the energy requirements of our body. Now, pag naparami yung kain natin, pag sobrang masarap yung pagkain natin, pag lechon yung kinakain natin, ay, so sigurado maparami yung kain natin. In that case, the glucose that is produced from sa sobrang kain natin, sobra yan sa pangangailangan ng katawan natin, the current requirements of our body. Sobra yan even after yung excess glucose ay napunta sa glycogen. So ang tanong, saan mapupunta yung sobra pang glucose after they have been distributed to the different cells of our body and after napuno pa yung glycogen? Itong excess glucose They go to our liver, they go to our muscles, and are converted into fat. Itong stored fat ngayon, ito yung tinatawag nating second reserve fuel tank ng ating katawan. So yung katawan natin ay may dalawang reserve fuel tank, yung glycogen at yung stored fat natin. So talo natin yung mga sasakyan. Ang sasakyan, isa lang yung fuel tank. Pero yung katawan natin, may dalawang fuel tank. Glycogen and yung stored fat natin. Now, this principle of two reserve fuel tanks proves that we really don't need to eat 3 meals a day. Bakit? Because kung nagfa-fasting tayo, pag hindi tayo kumakain, yung katawan natin ay kumukuha ng kailanganin niyang glucose sa glycogen. At sa sinabi na natin, yung glycogen has enough glucose for 12 hours of our bodily requirements. So, hindi nauubos yung glucose sa glycogen until after 12 hours. So, pwede kang hindi kakain ng 12 hours at walang mangyayari sa atin. Meron ka na bang nabalitaan na tao na namatay dahil hindi kumain for 12 hours? Of course, wala. Bakit? Because there's enough energy in glycogen to supply for our bodily energy requirements for 12 hours. At kung maubos na yung glycogen, yung glucose sa glycogen, what happens is our body switches to the use of its second fuel tank or stored fat. Pag tuloy-tuloy tayong hindi kakain even after 12 hours, ubos na yung glucose sa glycogen, our body switches to a substitute fuel. And that is our stored fat. And yung stored fat natin can supply our energy requirements for several days. Again, ibig sabihin, we can fast. We can stop eating for several days and nothing will happen to us. Bakit? Because we have two reserve fuel tanks. The glycogen, good for 12 hours, at yung taba natin, which can last us for several days, depending on how much fat we have in our body. Kaya, as I mentioned earlier, this principle of our body having two reserve fuel tanks proves our point that our body was never designed for it to continuously throughout the day take in food. Our body was never designed for us to be eating 3 meals a day. Because if our body was designed to be taking in food continuously throughout the day, or if our body was designed to have 3 meals a day, di, wala sanang dalawang reserve fuel tanks. Para ano pa, no? Yung reserve fuel tanks. Kung kumakain naman tayo continuously. But because our body was never designed to eat continuously throughout the day, because our body was never designed to have 3 meals a day, our body has two reserve fuel tanks. So our body was really designed to have a time of feasting and to have a time of fasting. It is only to the interest of the food industry and to some certain extent to the interests of the pharmaceutical companies that we have to eat 3 meals a day, that we have to eat continuously throughout the day. Because sino ang kikita? If we are eating continuously throughout the day, if we are eating 3 meals a day, of course, the food industry. And of course, indirectly, the pharmaceutical companies. Why? Because if we're eating continuously throughout the day, that will cause us to be sick. That will cause us to become obese. That will cause us to have hypertension. That will cause us to have diabetes. That will cause us to have fatty liver. If we just use our body according to what it has been designed, that means to have a period of feasting and to have a period of fasting, we will never get sick. We will never need to buy medicines. We will never need even to take vitamins. Because, as we said, our body was never designed to eat 3 meals a day. Thank you.